Chapter 34, Art and Artifice. The rest of the morning blurred. I showered, ridding myself of the last physical traces of the hotel, but not the lingering feeling of Polo. I tried to lose myself in my work, in the familiar comfort of the studio, but my mind kept circling back to the night before, to the questions that now swirled around me. Then he was there. Polo. Standing in the doorway of my studio, unannounced, bathed in the late afternoon sun, bearing a bottle of wine and a bouquet of sunflowers, my mother's favorites, the sneak, knew exactly what he was doing. He looked uncertain. Vulnerable. A far cry from the self-assured fraternity president. "I needed to see you," he said, his voice low and steady, his blue eyes searching mine. He didn't apologize for interrupting, for intruding. He simply stated a fact. I should have been annoyed. I should have been working, lost in the creative flow, finishing the sculpture that had been tormenting me all summer. But I wasn't. I was relieved. And, if I was being honest with myself, a little bit thrilled. "I left you a note," I said, my voice sounding surprisingly small even to my own ears. "I read it," he said, his gaze unwavering. "But I needed to hear it from you. I needed to know to confirm where we stand." The silence stretched thick with unspoken words. The air crackled with a tension that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I could feel the weight of his gaze, the intensity of his focus, and it made my skin prickle with awareness, made my heart beat a frantic tattoo against my ribs. I don't know what to say, Polo," I admitted finally, my voice a whisper. "Last night it was incredible. But it was also a lot. I need to process it," he nodded, understanding. "I get it," he said, his voice gentle. "But I don't regret it, Daph. Not one second. And I hope you don't either." I looked away, my cheeks flushing. Regret, no. That wasn't the right word. Fear, yes. Confusion, definitely. But regret, no. "I don't," I whispered, the words barely audible. But, he prompted, stepping closer, his hand reaching out, hovering just inches from my cheek. He didn't touch me, not yet. He was giving me the choice, the control. "But I'm still scared, Polo," I confessed, my voice raw with emotion. "I'm still afraid of losing myself. Of getting hurt." He nodded again, his expression serious. "I would never hurt you, Daph," he said, his voice sincere, his eyes filled with a tenderness that made my heart ache. "And I would never ask you to change, to be anyone other than who you are. I love you, Daph. Just the way you are." The words hung in the air, a declaration, a confession, a confirmation. "I love you." 3 simple words, yet they held the power to shatter the last of my defenses, to crumble the walls I'd so carefully constructed. Tears welled up in my eyes, tears of relief, of joy, of surrender. I'd been fighting this, resisting this, for so long. But now, hearing those words, seeing the truth in his eyes, I knew I couldn't fight it any longer. I love you too, Polo," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. "I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I gasped, my breath catching in my throat as I opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of satin, was a delicate silver chain. A single, perfectly crafted, copper laurel leaf hung from it. "I saw you working with the copper," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I wanted to give you this, to remember, to always be free." I was speechless. The tears finally spilling free, shimmering like diamonds. "Polo," he took the necklace and fastened it around my neck. The cool metal felt warm against my skin. "Now you'll always have a piece of your art, a piece of your strength with you." Overwhelmed, I threw her arms around Polo, holding him tight. Thank you," I whispered, choked with emotion. And then, his arms wrapping around me, pulling me close, holding me tight. I buried my face in his chest, inhaling the scent of his cologne, the warmth of his skin, the steady beat of his heart. He kissed me then, a slow, tender kiss, a sealing of our vows, a promise of a future together. It wasn't the frantic, desperate kiss of the night before. It was something deeper, something more profound, a kiss that spoke of love, of commitment, of a connection that transcended the physical. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless, both smiling, both filled with a sense of wonder, of disbelief, of hope. "So," he said, his voice husky, his eyes twinkling, "what happens now?" I laughed, a light, joyful sound that echoed through the studio. "I don't know," I said, shaking my head. "But I'm ready to find out. I looked around the studio, at the unfinished sculpture, at the tools of my trade, at the evidence of my passion. And then I looked back at Polo, at his handsome face, his kind eyes, his strong arms. Actually, I said, a mischievous glint in my eyes, I think I have an idea. I reached for the tube of crimson paint, the one I'd used for my self-portrait, the one that still held the faint imprint of my body. I squeezed a dollop onto my palm, the cool, viscous pigment a shock against my skin. Really? Polo asked, his voice laced with curiosity and a hint of apprehension. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached out and smeared the paint across his cheek, a bold red streak that stood out against his tan skin. He blinked, surprised, then a slow grin spread across his face. Oh, it's on, is it? He said, his eyes sparkling with challenge. He reached for the tube of paint, but I was faster. I danced away from him, laughing, my heart light and free. I smeared more paint on my hands, on my arms, on my breasts. Daphne, he exclaimed, a mixture of shock and laughter in his voice. What are you doing? I'm creating, I said, my voice playful, my eyes shining with a newfound confidence. I'm expressing myself. I'm claiming you. I lunged at him, pressing my painted hands against his chest, leaving bright red handprints on his clean white t-shirt. He laughed, grabbing my wrists, trying to stop me, but I was too quick, too agile. I smeared paint on his face, his neck, his arms. He retaliated, grabbing my waist, pulling me close, his hands leaving smudges of paint on my bare skin. We wrestled, we laughed, we chased each other around the studio, our bodies covered in paint, our hearts filled with a joy, a freedom, a sense of playful abandon that neither of us had expected. Finally, exhausted and breathless, we collapsed onto the paint-splattered dropcloth, our bodies intertwined, our laughter echoing through the room. You're a mess, Polo said, his voice filled with affection, his fingers gently wiping a smudge of paint from my cheek. So are you, I retorted, grinning up at him. He leaned down and kissed me, a slow, sweet kiss that tasted of paint and sweat and love. I love you, Daph, he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. I love your mess, your fire, your everything. I love you too, Polo, I whispered back, my heart overflowing with a happiness I'd never thought possible. And in that moment, surrounded by the chaos of my art, covered in paint, and wrapped in the arms of the man I loved, I knew that I had finally found my masterpiece. Not in metal or wood or paint, but in the messy, imperfect, beautiful reality of us.